Alright folks, how you doing? So a common misconception about William Wallace is that when he invaded England in the winter of 1297, he only got about as far as Carlisle and all this, and never really got very far. This is not true. The strategic position of England at the end of 1297 was very, very dangerous. They were in enormous peril. And I'll explain to you basically what happened. I'll be going through this when I go back on Unslaved as well, but this is a more detailed version. What basically happened is that after the Battle of Stirling Bridge, Wallace was as good as king. He didn't hold the title, but he held the authority. Andrew Murray, not really sure 100% what happened with him, but I would say he probably died in the battle, and they made him co-guardian as a sort of honorary title to keep the Highlanders on side. This is my own opinion. I can't back this up with documented facts or evidence. This is just what makes sense to me, because between September the 11th, which is the date of the Battle of Stirling Bridge, he died, Andrew Murray, supposedly in December. So that's September, October, November, December. Doesn't take 4 months to die of a battle wound, you know. Come on. Even back in those days. Especially in those days when medicine wasn't as advanced as it is nowadays. You know, it doesn't take you 4 months to die unless you're talking about cancer or something like that. You don't die of a battlefield wound 4 months later. So that to me is what makes the most sense, right? It says Andrew Murray perished in the fighting, so they made him co-guardian so as to please the Highlanders, because Highland culture and Lowland culture are very, very different. You know, you read books by Walter Scott or you watch movies like Braveheart, you think they're the same thing, but long story short, they're not. You know, people in Edinburgh have not traditionally spoken in Gaelic or worn kilts or even drank whiskey. The main alcohol of choice in Edinburgh for hundreds of years was French wine, but that's subject for another time. Edinburgh pretty much single-handedly kept Bordeaux in business for hundreds of years. You know, the economy of Bordeaux is pretty much fueled completely out of Edinburgh for centuries, but like I said, that's getting a bit sidetracked. So, what happens after the Battle of Stirling Bridge? Well, Wallace calls a parliament, but not everybody agrees to attend the parliament. The one who does not agree to attend is Earl Corspatrick, who still holds Dunbar and Dunbar Castle, which is where the English fled to straight after the battle took place. They went to Dunbar because it was basically the only port left in Scotland that was still open to them and still in friendly hands. Now, Corspatrick, from what I understand it, was a Scottish lord who was loyal to King Edward. Again, I can't 100% back this up, but this is what it seems like, because he's described as a traitor. Well, if you're a traitor, that means you're going against your own, meaning probably a Scot. And he also commands a strong force of Scots who are loyal to the alliance with England. So Earl Corspatrick feels that he's in a position to basically tell Wallace to get lost, because he's still backed up by King Edward. And he mocks Wallace by calling him the King of Kyle. So like I said, Wallace has the authority of a king, if not the title, for the most part, throughout Scotland. And, you know, he's got the Highlanders on side through clever diplomacy, politics, you know, naming Andrew Murray co-guardian, even though he's probably dead. But anyway, so Wallace commands the majority of Scotland, but he doesn't command the whole country. So then he invades the lands of Corspatrick. Now, Corspatrick is in tight with a man called Bishop Anthony Beck, who's basically the right-hand man of King Edward I in northern England and southern Scotland, and also Robert the Bruce. So anyway, getting back to the point here, Corspatrick sends for aid from both Bishop Beck and Robert the Bruce. Now, Robert the Bruce at this time is under the command of Bishop Beck, because Bishop Beck is the right-hand man of King Edward I. So basically, Bishop Beck is in charge of the north of England, from Durham and from Carlisle. That's his seat of power. So, Bishop Beck marshals together an army of about 10,000 men. This is what we're told according to Henry the Minstrel. And now they're going up to back up Earl Corspatrick, and hopefully they can ward off Wallace, if not overthrow him. So now it's on, big time. So Wallace marshals an army about 5,000 strong, and tries to march on Earl Corspatrick's land before the reinforcements from England can arrive. So it's like a preemptive strike. This does not work. The English get into and also the Scots who are loyal to King Edward. So this is the Anglo-Scottish force under Cormac, Bruce and Beck, which is as much Scots as it is English, because like I said, it's politically complex. So the Anglo-Scottish force, who are loyal to King Edward and loyal to Cormac, they meet Wallace's faction at what's called the Battle of the Spottismere. And this is a major defeat for Wallace, because he's outnumbered about 4-1. The Anglo-Scottish force loyal to King Edward managed to surround them in the woods, so this is a strategic failure. Wallace fails to march on Dunbar in time before the reinforcements can arrive from the north of England, and also from the lands that are loyal to Cormac. So this is a huge defeat. So what happens? Wallace doubles down. Only a mere matter of hours later, because the English retire, well, the Anglo-Scots, I should say, the loyalists to England, they retire to the Lammermuir Hills, thinking that they've won. So they've lowered their guard. What does Wallace do? He strikes the Anglo-Scottish force loyal to Edward at dawn, when they're not ready. And he absolutely destroys them. Because the Anglo-Scots loyal to England, they think that they've won the battle. They think it's just a case of sweeping up operations now. Like, the main battle's been won. But that's not what happens. See, Wallace is a master of asymmetric warfare. He doesn't tend to do his best when he's fighting army against army on a flat-out strategic battlefield. Wallace is a guerrilla fighter, first and foremost. This is where his strengths lie. So he's able to surround the Cormac, Bruce, Beck force in the hills right throughout the middle of the night. They're getting into position, and when the first, dawn light comes, they just sweep in and destroy them. How do they do this? Well, mostly through shock tactics, what we would call today. Archery, cavalry, just sweeping in and hitting them when they're not expecting it. So Beck, Bruce and Cormac, they're forced to retreat and their army is destroyed. So now Wallace is completely in charge of Scotland. The last remnants of resistance at Dunbar have fallen. Dunbar falls into Scottish hands. So now Wallace is in an extremely powerful position. Because, he wasn't in charge of the whole country before, now he is. The last remains of English power in Scotland have been swept aside in a very, very decisive fashion. So now what happens? Wallace invades England. He gathers together a huge army said by the Minstrel to be 40,000 strong at Roslin Muir. And he just sweeps right in. And the Scots just burn the whole place down. I mean, it's a complete disaster for England. They've had 2 massive armies destroyed in quick succession. They're going to need time to raise another one. You just can't raise an army overnight like that and just equip them. So what happens? Wallace gets about as far as York. The way it's described, he gets to about the suburbs of York. And then emissaries from King Edward meet him there, outside of York. And they say, okay, give us 40 days and we'll meet you in an open field and that will settle the whole affair. Wallace agrees to this. Now, was this a good decision by Wallace? Yes and no. First of all, he would need those 40 days to build siege equipment to properly attack York, because they've swept in, but they don't really have any means of taking the town. So the Scots need that time as well to build siege engines, to build siege towers, to build battering rams, catapults, that sort of thing. And to do it properly, you need a bit of time. You need a few weeks, so 40 days suits them fine. Also, the English Parliament needs time to recall their troops from France and from Ireland and from Wales and other places in order to gather a proper army to go face the Scots, because Wallace has gathered an extremely powerful army. It's described by Henry the Minstrel as the best equipped army in the world. And a lot of this will be equipment that they've taken off the English, by the way. So the Scots are using their own equipment against them. Stuff they would have liberated from Dunbar Castle, or liberated from the army they just destroyed in the Lammermuir Hills, or the army that just drowned at the Forth River at Stirling Bridge. So the Scots army is very, very well equipped at this time, and very experienced as well. Very powerful. Strongest army in the world at this time. But they don't have siege weapons, because they've swept in really, really quick. In fact, Wallace, when he attacks England, he bypasses Roxburgh Castle and Berwick Castle, as in Berwick upon Tweed. He doesn't lay siege to those castles. The reason, because if he did that, he would get bogged down. See, Wallace is not an idiot. he knows he can't afford to bog his men down taking these strong castles. So what he says to them, in effect, is, we're going to go into England now, and we're going to destroy England's armies in there, and we're going to bring King Edward down to his knees, and we're going to ask for the keys of the castle back. You better fucking give up the keys when we ask for them, otherwise we're going to sack this place and we're going to kill every single one of you and hang you up by your guts. So we're not going to attack you now, but we'll be back. So when we come back, you better do as we say. Very clever. So, 40 days elapse. The English Parliament meets with King Edward, and they don't raise an army. They argue, for some reason, that because Wallace is not a king himself, that King Edward cannot face him in the field. This is according to the Minstrel. Bizarre logic, but to my mind, it's kind of not bizarre in a way, because what they're trying to do is sow dissent within the Scottish ranks, because Wallace is a second-born son, under the feudal system. He has no claim to the throne. So what they're hoping for is that the Scottish nobles who have joined Wallace, whose allegiance has always been mutable, shall we say, will turn on Wallace now, and if Wallace accepts the crown, they will say that Wallace is a tyrant and a usurper and all the rest of it, and they're just trying to basically turn the Scots against each other. Until Lord Campbell, I believe it is, comes up with a solution. Just make him king for one day. So they crown Wallace in front of the English emissaries in a sort of mock feign ceremony sort of thing. So now the English think, oh, now we're royally fucked, because their scheme to try and turn the Scots against each other has not worked. Because Wallace really is a king of Scots, and now their effort at subversion has royally fucking backfired on them. Now they've got Wallace as king, they think. So now King Edward is going to have to go out and face him. But does that happen? Nope. York voluntarily surrenders, because the Scots really go hard at York. Because, like Wallace points out in Braveheart, York was a staging point for every invasion of Scotland. That's absolutely true, but so was Carlisle as well. But that's a side issue. But yeah, York was a major strategic town that needed to fall, because when York goes, the whole of Northern England's gone. So now, and that's basically what happens, because the Scots tried to storm York, but the defenders in York put up a very, very heroic defence. They pushed the Scots back. Now the Scots are running out of food, but the people in York don't know this. And the people in York recognise the Scots are hitting them, hammering them, just hammering. It's described as they're hitting from all four sides. At every gate, the Scots are attacking, and they're really hitting the walls really, really hard with everything they've got. They're trying really hard to take the town, because this is a very important location. So the people in York agree to voluntarily surrender. This is what happens, by the way, in most sieges. They end this way, negotiation. This is the end of most sieges. So the people in York agree to fly the line rampant for a few hours on top of the walls to signify that the Scots have effectively won the battle, even though the town remains intact. This goes back to the time of William the Conqueror, because the Saxons in the north of England have no particular allegiance to the Normans who've came in. In fact, Wallace's own ancestor, Thorlongus, who, like I said, was an Anglo-Danish chief, he fought on the side of the Scots against the Normans 10 generations back from when Wallace was alive. So this is how and why Thorlongus and Clan Crawford came into being. Because the king, I think the name of the king at the time was King Edwin, he granted lands and titles to the Crawford family, this is Wallace's maternal line, in exchange for the service of Thorlongus as a Northumbrian Anglo-Danish chief fighting with the Scots against the Normans. So you can see how the people of York would be persuaded to make a peace with Wallace, because this will be remembered. Remember, it's all factions and things like this. It's very politically complicated. So anyway, York is now gone, and Wallace is moving further and further and further into England. North Allerton, he takes that. He gets as far as St. Albans, and now it's like 1941 when the Germans are just outside Moscow, effectively. But this is going back a lot further in time. But this is basically the situation that the English are facing. To use comparative terms. And you've got King Edward holed up in Westminster Palace, absolutely shitting his pants, because he knows Wallace has got him by the balls. And no one is willing to go negotiate with Wallace. They're just kind of putting their heads in the sand and just hoping somehow for a fucking miracle to happen. Because Wallace is at the gates now. And Wallace has sent, messages to King Edward saying, I'm coming for you. Unless you come and fight me on the field, I will storm the gates of London. He sent him he took a castle, I forget the name of it, and it was held by a nephew of King Edward. And when Wallace found out who the captain of the castle was, he burned it down, beheaded him, and sent him his nephew's head and said, "You're next." So things are really not looking very good for England now. And no one's willing to go face Wallace. So who goes and faces him? Who else but Queen Margaret of France, the 18-year-old bride of King Edward, who's the sister of King Philip the Fair. And she persuades him to allow the king's negotiators to come and talk peace with Wallace. And he permits this to happen because she manages to win him over. So Wallace gets pretty much everything that he wants. He gets all the hostages back, or pretty much all of them, that London has held since the Battle of Dunbar in 1296. So a lot of the old hostages and a lot of the old nobles, which includes John Comyn, by the way, the Red Comyn. If you've seen Outlaw King, you'll know who I mean. You know, a lot of the Scots nobility who were taken prisoner 2 years ago are released. The keys for Berwick and for Roxburgh Castle are handed over peacefully. And basically Wallace is given a shitload of money to go home. So Wallace, having completely crushed England, returns home and restores the land 3 times. This is what's described by Henry the Minstrel. So it's very interesting. Wallace had London by the balls and he could have attacked. But it was the power of a woman, you know, Queen Margaret, the French princess, who talked him down. Who said, "Wallace, peace is better than war." And Wallace is saying to Queen Margaret, "Look at all the grievances that they did to us." You know, and then when Queen Margaret returns to London, she speaks very highly of Wallace. And also word gets to Philip of the Fair of France, her brother, about what Wallace is like. So this is deeply, deeply humiliating by you know, at the hands of Wallace, what King Edward has had to suffer here. King Edward has been absolutely humiliated in the eyes of Europe, and in the eyes of the French, and in the eyes of his own people. The only reason he's not overthrown is no one else was willing to go negotiate with Wallace either. But, you know, King Edward is very, very deeply embarrassed by this. And, you know, he held on to power by basically his fingernails. I think the reason also why Wallace did not attack London and take London is that he wasn't really looking to conquer England. He just wanted England to stop trying to conquer Scotland. Those are two very, very different mindsets, very different things. Because Wallace has seen the folly of military occupation. He's underwent wars against the English occupiers of Scotland. He knows if he conquers England, he's going to have to station garrisons in English towns. And he knows how that's going to go because he's fought on the other side of an occupation. He's not interested in conquering England. He's not interested in subjugating London. He doesn't want to conquer England. All he wants is to try and get England to back the fuck off. Recognise our sovereignty. We're a sovereign, independent political unit. Scotland is not part of England. Scotland is its own entity. If you recognise that, and if you promise to leave us alone, and swear by holy oaths that you'll leave us the hell alone, we won't have a problem. Just back the fuck off and stop trying to take us over. This is basically what he's saying. And this is why Queen Margaret is able to get through to Wallace and get him to back off and return home. Very interesting indeed. But you'll never read that in the main official history books. But Wallace brought England down to its knees. He had England by the balls. He could have taken London if he wanted. Very likely. I mean, it would have been a very hard fight. That's another reason why not to do it. You know, if you know, Sun Tzu talks about this in The Art of War. Never corner your enemy and leave them nowhere to go, because then they'll double down and really fight you hard. I think this is another reason why Wallace did not directly attack London, because he would have taken a hell of a lot of losses trying to take the town. That was the last resort. I think the preferable piece, because Wallace is not an idiot, the preferable outcome is to get the English to negotiate. The threat of attacking London is more powerful than actually attacking London, because couldn't even take York really. You know, they had to agree to a negotiated settlement with York. The Scots army is more suited to lightning war rather than a protracted, drawn-out siege. Look at the Battle of Stalingrad. Absolute bloodbath in the streets. Wallace is smarter than that. Why does he not attack Roxburgh? Why does he not attack Berwick? Why does he negotiate with York? You know, all three did not fall to Stormham. You know, the keys for Roxburgh and Berwick were voluntarily surrendered. And York voluntarily gave up through a negotiated peace, because Wallace is no fool. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this analysis, and thanks for watching.